Daniel had always been curious about the stories hidden inside the land. Ever since he was a child, he loved reading about old cultures, ancient ways of living, and the wisdom people carried long before modern life changed everything. So when he finally saved enough money, he planned a long trip through the deserts of Arizona. He wanted to walk where the people of the land once walked, see the places they protected, and understand the history that lived beneath the open sky. He carried only what he needed: a small tent, a warm sleeping bag, a little heater, food, water, and a notebook where he wrote down everything he observed. Most days he walked for hours, stopping only when the sun became too strong. The desert was quiet but never empty. Every rock, every cactus, every distant sound of wind carried a story. Daniel loved that feeling. One afternoon, after a long hike, he reached a peaceful area where the land stretched far in every direction. Not too far from his chosen spot, he noticed a small Apache community. The homes were simple, built in harmony with the land, and the people moved with calm purpose. Daniel kept a respectful distance, reminding himself that he was only a visitor. He didn't want to disturb anyone. He set up his tent on a nearby slope where he could enjoy the reddish glow of the sunset. The day had been warm, but the desert was known for its sudden temperature drops after dark. Daniel checked his supplies and made sure his small heater was ready. He zipped up his jacket and prepared a simple meal as the sun slowly sank behind the rocky hills. The sky shifted from bright orange to deep purple until finally the first stars began to appear. By the time night settled fully, the temperature had dropped sharply. Cold air rushed across the sand, making the tent fabric tremble. Daniel wrapped himself in a blanket, thinking he would sleep early. But before he could even close his eyes, he heard soft footsteps outside the tent. He froze for a moment, unsure who could be wandering around this late. The footsteps were light, careful, not the sound of an animal. Daniel sat up, listening closely. After a few seconds, a soft voice called from outside. "Hello?" Daniel immediately recognized it as the voice of a young girl. He opened the tent flap slowly and saw a figure standing at a short distance. The light was dim, but the moon gave enough glow for him to see her clearly. She was a young Apache girl, maybe 15 or 16, wrapped in a thin shawl that wasn't enough to protect her from the cold. Her cheeks were red from the wind, and her hands were tightly pressed against her arms for warmth. Daniel was surprised, but gentle. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. The girl nodded, though she was clearly shivering. "It got colder than I expected," she said. "The wind changed direction. I wasn't prepared." Daniel understood immediately. The desert could be unpredictable at night. "Do you need to warm up?" he asked. She hesitated, looking toward her community in the distance. The homes were far, and the wind had become stronger. Finally, she stepped closer and nodded again. Daniel moved aside, opening the tent wider so she could step inside. The girl quietly slipped in and sat down near the small portable heater Daniel had turned on. She held her hands close to it, breathing out slowly as the warmth reached her fingers. Daniel didn't want her to feel uncomfortable, so he sat on the opposite side of the tent, giving her enough space. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel didn't want to ask too many questions and make her feel awkward. The only sound inside the tent was the steady hum of the heater and the wind brushing outside. After a few minutes, the girl finally looked up and gave a small smile. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome," Daniel replied kindly. "My name is Daniel." "I'm Taya," she said. The name suited her. It sounded gentle yet strong. Taya continued warming her hands, and Daniel noticed how calm she seemed despite the unexpected situation. She didn't appear frightened or nervous. Instead, she looked thoughtful, almost like she had made a decision before coming to him. Daniel wondered why she had come to his tent instead of returning directly to her family's home. Maybe their place was too far, or maybe the cold struck suddenly. He didn't want to assume anything, so he simply waited. Outside, the wind became louder, pushing against the tent, but the inside stayed warm and quiet. Taya looked around curiously, noticing Daniel's notebook, his map, and his small stack of books about Native American history. "You travel alone?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "Yes. I like learning about different cultures. I've always wanted to understand the land better and the people who lived here long before anything changed." Taya listened carefully, as if weighing each of his words. She didn't interrupt. Her focus made Daniel feel like she wasn't just asking out of casual interest. She was trying to understand him. "That is good," she finally said. "Some people come here without respect. They leave things behind or take rocks from the land, but you look like someone who wants to learn." Her words surprised Daniel a little. He had tried his best to be respectful and careful, but he didn't expect anyone to notice. Taya then looked down at a small pouch hanging from a cord around her neck. She touched it lightly, almost protectively, as if it carried something important. Daniel noticed the gesture, but didn't ask about it. The temperature continued to drop, and Daniel brought out an extra blanket, placing it near Taya without saying much. She accepted it with a grateful nod and wrapped it around her shoulders. For a long moment, they sat quietly together. The warm air from the heater slowly filled the tent, melting the coldness that had followed Taya inside. Daniel felt strangely peaceful, as if the desert night was slowly settling around them, holding everything still. He still didn't understand why she had come to his tent. Maybe she really only needed warmth. Maybe her home was too far. Or maybe there was something else she wasn't ready to say yet. But Daniel didn't press. All he knew was that the unexpected meeting made the night feel different. Like something meaningful was beginning quietly, without anyone planning it. And as the wind outside softened just a little, Daniel glanced at Taya again. Her eyes were calm, thoughtful, and steady. She wasn't lost, frightened, or confused. She seemed to have a sense of purpose, something she carried quietly within her. Daniel didn't know it yet, but this cold desert night would turn into one of the most unforgettable moments of his journey, because the girl who stepped into his tent had come for more than warmth. She came with a reason he could not have guessed. The soft glow of the small heater filled the tent with a gentle warmth. But Daniel could sense that Taya's silent presence carried something the cold had not explained. She sat with her hands stretched toward the warmth, but her calm eyes kept drifting toward the pouch hanging on the cord around her neck. It was small, made of leather, decorated with tiny beads, and she touched it every now and then, as if it reminded her of something she needed to remember. Daniel noticed all of this quietly, but he didn't want to make her feel pressured. He didn't ask questions unless she wanted to talk. Instead, he watched her expressions, trying to understand what brought her here on such a cold night. Taya finally took a slow breath, as if preparing her thoughts. "You travel alone, but you don't look afraid," she said. Her voice was soft but steady. Daniel offered a small smile. "I like being alone sometimes. It helps me see things more clearly. And the desert is peaceful." Taya nodded. "Many people think the desert is only empty, but it's full of life. It listens." Daniel found her words interesting. He had walked for hours earlier that day, noticing how every part of the land seemed alive in its own way. It made sense to him that someone who grew up here would feel the desert like a living presence. "You speak as if the land is a person," Daniel said with curiosity. "It is," Taya replied simply. "To us, the land is alive. It watches how people treat it." Daniel fell quiet. He didn't know whether to continue the conversation or let her speak at her own pace. She didn't seem uncomfortable, only thoughtful, as if choosing each word carefully. After a minute, Taya's gaze moved toward the tent door, but she didn't seem like she wanted to leave. Instead, her eyes softened. and she looked back at Daniel. "You were on the trail earlier today," she said slowly, "near the old cottonwood tree." Daniel nodded, surprised she knew. "Yes, I stopped there for a while." "You helped an injured horse," she continued. Daniel's eyebrows rose. He had not seen anyone around when he had found the horse struggling with a twisted leg near a patch of dry bushes. He had given it water, calmed it, and carefully freed its leg without causing harm. He thought nobody had noticed. "You saw that?" he asked. Taya shook her head. "I didn't, but someone from my community did. They told the elders." Daniel was silent for a moment. He hadn't expected his simple act of kindness to be seen, much less talked about. "We watch the land," Taya said. "We watch how people behave on it. Some walk without care, but you were gentle. The horse trusted you." She spoke these words without praise or exaggeration. It felt like she was simply stating a fact. Daniel didn't know what to say. He helped the horse because it felt like the right thing to do, not because he wanted attention. But now he wondered if Taya's visit was connected to that moment. Still, he didn't want to jump to conclusions. "Anyone would have helped," Daniel said modestly. Taya shook her head again. "No, not everyone. Some people ignore the animals. Some people are afraid. Some people don't see them at all because they move too fast." Her words carried a quiet truth. Daniel had seen hikers earlier who moved at a speed that didn't allow them to notice much around them. Taya's fingers gently brushed the small pouch again. Daniel's eyes followed the movement, and she noticed. "You can ask," she said with a small smile. "I know you want to." Daniel looked embarrassed. "Only if you want to tell me," he said honestly. "It seems important." "It is," she said softly. She held the pouch in her hand, but did not open it yet. Instead, she looked at Daniel with a calm but searching gaze. "My people believe that everything happens for a reason," she said. "Tonight, the cold wind suddenly changed direction. It became stronger than it should have. It pushed me toward your camp." Daniel listened carefully. Her voice carried a meaning he didn't fully understand yet. "And earlier today," she continued, "the elders said that a traveler with a gentle heart walked through our land." Daniel was confused. "Me?" Taya nodded once. "Yes, they told me to watch you." Daniel blinked. "Watch me? Why?" Taya did not answer immediately. Instead, she took a moment to close her eyes and breathe slowly. The heater hummed softly, filling the quiet space. Finally, she spoke again. "Sometimes the elders choose someone from outside to be part of a small learning ceremony, but they don't choose easily. They ask someone from the younger generation to observe the traveler first." Daniel felt like the air inside the tent had thickened with meaning. "You're observing me?" he asked gently, not offended, just surprised. "Yes," Taya said calmly. "I needed to see how you speak, how you listen, how you respect the land, and how you respect another human being." Daniel leaned back slightly. He had expected the night to be simple, just cold weather and rest, but this young girl sitting across from him seemed to have come with a purpose far deeper than he had imagined. "But," Daniel began carefully, "I thought you came because you were cold." Taya's lips curved into a small, peaceful smile. "I was cold," she said. "But that's not the only reason I came." She looked down at the pouch again, and Daniel finally saw her fingers tightening around it with a sense of responsibility. "What's inside the pouch?" he asked softly. Taya gently lifted it, letting the beads catch the light. "It holds items used in our traditions, feathers, beads, and a small stone that has been in my family for many years." Daniel felt honored she was even showing it to him. "When I carry this pouch," Taya continued, "it means I am on a task given to me by the elders. It means I must be observant and wise." Daniel now understood the seriousness in her eyes earlier. She didn't come to him randomly. She didn't choose his tent because of a simple need to warm up. She came because she had been sent. She sat quietly again, as if waiting to see Daniel's reaction. But he remained calm. He felt grateful she trusted him enough to share the truth. "So," Daniel said gently, "you didn't come only to warm up. You came because you wanted to understand me." "Yes," Taya replied. "I needed to see your spirit." Daniel's face softened with humility. "And what did you see?" Taya looked at him for several seconds. Her gaze was steady and thoughtful. "I saw kindness," she said, "and someone who listens. Not everyone listens." Daniel felt a quiet warmth fill his chest, not from pride, but from the realization that his small actions had been noticed by people who valued them deeply. Outside, the wind eased, brushing against the tent like a softer whisper now. Inside, the air felt calm, almost peaceful. Taya pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders, but her expression was no longer just that of a girl seeking warmth. She looked like someone who had completed an important step in her duty. Daniel still didn't know what would happen next, but he could feel that the night was slowly revealing a story he had never expected to be part of. Taya's purpose had not been just warmth. She had come to understand him, and soon she would reveal what she truly meant to ask. The wind outside continued to blow, but the sound had changed. Earlier it was sharp and restless, but now it moved like a quieter breath across the desert, as if the land itself sensed something meaningful happening inside the small tent. Daniel sat with his back against his bag, trying to understand everything Taya had just told him. He still felt surprised, but also strangely calm. Nothing about the girl seemed dangerous or worrying. Instead, she carried a seriousness that made Daniel pay attention to every detail. Taya sat near the heater, her fingers no longer trembling from the cold. She held the pouch gently in her lap, running her thumb across the smooth leather. Daniel could see that the small object meant far more than its size suggested. It was part of a tradition, part of her role, part of the reason she had come. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like both were listening to something deeper than words. The sound of wind, the soft crackle of the heater, the steady rhythm of their breaths. Finally, Daniel broke the quiet. "Earlier today," he said softly, "when I was helping the horse, I didn't think anyone saw. I just wanted to help." Taya looked at him with eyes that reflected the warm light inside the tent. "That is why they noticed," she replied, "because you did it without wanting anything." Daniel nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He had always believed kindness didn't need an audience, but knowing someone had observed that moment made it feel different, like an unseen thread had connected him to this community long before Taya ever stepped into his tent. He wanted to ask more questions, but before he could speak, Taya gently opened the pouch. Inside were 3 small items. She placed them carefully on the blanket between them: a small carved stone, a feather with black and white patterns, and a bead made of polished wood. Daniel leaned forward slightly, curious but respectful. Each item looked simple, but he could tell they held history. Taya touched the feather first. "This feather reminds us to listen," she said quietly. "The wind carries messages, and our elders say only those who listen with patience hear them truly." Daniel admired the feather for a moment. It seemed delicate, yet strong, much like Taya's presence. She then pointed to the wooden bead. "This bead is made from a tree that stood for many years before falling naturally. From the fallen branch, my grandfather carved many beads. They remind us that life continues in different forms." Daniel found her explanation gentle and meaningful. There was a sense of continuity in her words, a respect for nature he had rarely seen. Finally, Taya touched the small stone. It was smooth and light-colored, shaped naturally by the earth. "This stone," she said, "is passed to a person who will help guide someone outside our community. It means responsibility." Daniel felt a sudden sense of confusion. "Guide someone?" he asked quietly. "Guide who?" Taya lifted her eyes to meet his. "You," she said simply. Daniel's breath caught for a moment. He didn't feel afraid, just surprised. He wasn't used to being chosen for anything meaningful, especially not by strangers who valued tradition. "Why me?" he asked, not out of doubt but genuine curiosity. Taya thought for a moment, choosing her words with care. "Every season, the elders watch the travelers who walk through our land. They believe that sometimes the land sends a person who needs to learn something deeper. This time, they think it is you." Daniel sat back slightly. He felt the weight of her words, but not in a heavy way, in a way that made him feel seen. He had come to the desert to learn, to understand, to grow, but he never imagined the land or the people living on it would notice his purpose. "So, the cold wind," Daniel said slowly. "You think it pushed you here? For a reason?" Taya nodded. "Yes, but also because the elders sent me to observe your spirit." Daniel let out a soft breath, almost a laugh of disbelief, but not mocking, just amazed. "My spirit?" he repeated. "Yes," she replied. "How you act when no one is watching, how you treat the land, how you speak, how you look at people." She paused. "And you passed." Daniel wasn't sure whether to smile or feel overwhelmed. No one had ever spoken to him like this before. He felt honored and more aware of his actions than ever. "What happens now?" he finally asked. Taya folded the pouch again without closing it. "Now," she said softly, "I need to tell the elders what I saw, and if they agree, you may be invited to a small ceremony at sunrise." "Sunrise?" Daniel repeated. "Yes," Taya said. "It is not a big ceremony. It is quiet. It is about listening, about learning, about respecting the land. Only a few outsiders have ever been invited." Daniel felt something shift inside him. He had walked across the desert expecting to learn from books, signs, and landscapes. He never imagined he would be invited into something living, something carried through generations, but he also felt uncertain. "Are you sure I'm the right person?" he asked quietly. "I don't want to disrespect anything by accident." Taya smiled softly. "If you were disrespectful, I would not be here." Daniel felt warmth at her words, more comforting than the heater beside them. He realized that from the moment she stepped into the tent, she had been observing everything, his expressions, his silence, his patience. "You ask questions carefully," she said. "You don't interrupt. You don't speak loudly. You don't look down on anyone. These things matter." Daniel thought of his long walks through the desert, how he stopped often just to look at the sky, the rocks, the plants. Maybe the land had watched him too. The tent grew quieter again. Taya wrapped the blanket closer, but she wasn't shivering anymore. Her calmness made Daniel feel calm too. The mystery that had been growing since she arrived was slowly becoming clearer. She hadn't come because she was lost, and not because she was frightened. She came because she carried a task, one she took seriously, one that required trust, observation, and wisdom beyond her young age. Daniel sensed that the night was not finished revealing its meaning. There was still more she wanted to tell him, more he needed to understand. Taya glanced at the small heater, then at Daniel. "There is something else," she said quietly. "Another reason I came." Daniel leaned forward just slightly. "What is it?" Taya didn't answer immediately. She closed the pouch gently, holding it in both hands. Her expression grew thoughtful, as if the truth she was about to share required careful timing. She looked at Daniel with steady eyes, eyes that held a message she had prepared even before stepping into his tent. And in that moment, Daniel felt the mystery deepen again. The desert, the wind, the cold night, the old traditions. Everything seemed to be leading him toward something he had never expected. Taya took a gentle breath, and then she began revealing what she truly meant. Inside the quiet tent, Daniel waited patiently for Taya to speak. He could sense that whatever she was about to say mattered greatly, not just to her, but to the community she came from. The wind outside brushed against the fabric, creating a soft rhythm. It felt as if the entire desert had paused to listen. Taya held the small pouch carefully, almost as if it were guiding her thoughts. She finally lifted her eyes. "When I said there was another reason I came," she began, "I meant that the elders asked me to decide something." Her voice was calm, but there was a deeper seriousness behind it. Daniel gave a gentle nod to show he understood. "What did they ask you to decide?" Taya looked down at the items in the pouch again, touching the smooth stone with her fingertips. "They asked me to decide if you should be invited to a learning ceremony that happens only at sunrise," she said quietly. "It is very old. Only a few people outside our community have ever joined." Daniel listened closely. He could hear the importance of the moment in her voice. She wasn't just telling him something, she was sharing a responsibility. "What is the ceremony about?" Daniel asked softly. "It is about understanding the land in a deeper way," Taya said. "It teaches respect, balance, and the idea that everything is connected. People who come must have a calm heart. They must be willing to learn without expecting anything." Daniel breathed slowly, letting her words sink in. He had always wanted to learn from the land, but never expected he would be invited into something sacred. He didn't respond right away, wanting to show respect by listening fully. Taya continued, "The elders don't choose travelers only because they want to teach them. They choose them because they believe the land wants those people to learn." Daniel was surprised. "The land chooses?" he asked. "Yes," she said simply. "Not in words, but in signs. Sometimes it guides a person to the right place. Sometimes it makes something happen that connects two people at the right time. The way you helped the horse, the way you walked through the desert, the way the wind pushed me tonight, these are signs." Daniel felt a quiet shiver run through him, not from cold, but from the feeling that he was part of something bigger than he realized. "So," Daniel asked slowly, "you came to choose whether I should be part of the sunrise ceremony?" Taya nodded. "Yes, and I chose to invite you." Her voice was steady. Daniel blinked in surprise. "You already decided?" "Yes," Taya said, "because I watched you. I listened to how you spoke. I saw how patient you were, even when you didn't understand what I was doing." Daniel felt a mixture of gratitude and humility. He didn't think he had done anything special, but Taya's community clearly valued qualities that many people overlooked. "But there's something else you need to understand," she said softly. Daniel sat up straighter. "What is it?" Taya wrapped the blanket around herself, as if gathering her thoughts. "This ceremony is not just about you learning from us," she said. "It is also about us learning from you." Daniel frowned slightly, confused. "From me?" "Yes," she replied. "When an outsider is invited, it means the elders believe they have something in their spirit that we can also learn from. It's not one-sided, it's a sharing." Daniel felt a gentle warmth spread through him. "I don't know what I could teach," he admitted honestly. "I'm just someone who loves nature and history." Taya smiled softly. "Sometimes teaching is not done through words. It comes from how you see the world, how you walk, how you care. Your kindness to the horse, that was a teaching." Daniel looked down, touched by her words. He had never seen kindness as something worth noticing. To him, it was natural. But Taya made him realize that even simple actions could carry meaning far beyond the moment. Outside, the wind quieted further, as if settling into a peaceful lull. Taya adjusted the pouch and continued. If you come to the ceremony, you must come with an open heart. You do not need to know traditions. You just need to be present and respectful. I can do that, Daniel said sincerely. I would be honored. Taya studied his expression for a moment, making sure he truly meant what he said. When she seemed satisfied, she gave a small nod. There is something else, she said, lowering her voice slightly. The ceremony happens before the first light touches the desert. You must be ready to walk with me in the dark. It is not a long walk, but it is quiet. We don't speak during it. Daniel respected the simplicity and discipline behind her words. I understand, he said. We walk in silence because the land is also waking, Taya explained. It teaches us to listen deeply. Daniel felt a strange sense of anticipation. He had walked the desert many times, but never with such purpose, and never guided by someone connected to its traditions. Taya then opened the pouch again. She took out the smooth stone and held it out to Daniel. If you accept the invitation, you must carry this stone until sunrise. Daniel reached out carefully, feeling the light weight of the stone as she placed it in his palm. It was warm from her touch and smooth like river rock. He didn't know its full meaning yet, but he understood it symbolized his acceptance. What does the stone represent? Daniel asked. It represents responsibility, Taya said. Not pressure, not fear, just awareness. If you hold it until sunrise, it shows you are ready to understand the land with a quiet mind. Daniel curled his fingers around the stone gently. I will take care of it. Taya nodded. The stone will guide you. If your mind becomes restless, hold it. If you feel unsure, hold it. It will remind you to be present. Daniel looked at the stone and felt something calm settle inside him. It was simple, but meaningful. Taya glanced at the entrance of the tent. We will leave before dawn. I will return for you. Daniel felt grateful that she trusted him enough to guide him. I'll be ready. Taya gave him another small smile, quiet, warm, and sincere. I believe you. The tent fell silent again. The heater hummed quietly. The cold outside seemed distant compared to the warmth inside. Daniel felt connected to something he didn't fully understand yet, but he wanted to learn. He looked at Taya. Thank you, he said softly. You're welcome, she replied. Tonight, the desert brought our paths together for a reason. Daniel believed her. The night was no longer just a cold desert night. It had become a turning point, a moment that would lead him into a new understanding of the land, the people, and himself. And as Taya prepared to leave the tent and return to her community for a few hours, Daniel knew that the sunrise ahead would not be just another morning. It would be a lesson waiting for him. When the first light of morning touched the tops of the trees, Daniel slowly opened his eyes. For a moment he lay still, noticing how peaceful the world felt. The soft glow of dawn came through the opening of the tent, painting everything in a gentle golden color. He turned his head and saw Ayana sitting near the entrance, quietly watching the sunrise. Her posture was calm, and her face seemed even softer in the early morning light. Daniel sat up and rubbed his eyes. Ayana turned and gave him a small smile, the kind that did not need any words. He felt a warmth in his chest at the sight of her. He wondered how quickly things had changed, how someone he had never met before had become a part of his days and thoughts so naturally. Ayana pointed toward the brightening sky and then placed her hand over her heart. Daniel understood that she meant the morning felt special to her. He nodded, and the two of them watched the light grow stronger. For a few minutes, neither spoke, but the silence felt comfortable. Finally, Daniel stood and stretched his arms. "I should get ready for the day," he said softly, though he wasn't sure if she understood every word. Ayanna didn't need language to understand his meaning. She gestured toward the small fire outside and began preparing it again. Daniel helped gather a few pieces of wood and handed them to her. They worked together in quiet harmony. As the fire warmed again, Daniel made a simple breakfast with what little supplies he had left. Ayanna watched with curiosity, as if she found every small task interesting. When he handed her a portion, she accepted it with gentle gratitude. It amazed Daniel how gracefully she moved, how thoughtful her actions always seemed. After breakfast, Ayanna looked toward the forest trail, the same path where she had appeared days before. She seemed hesitant, as if unsure whether to stay or leave. Daniel noticed her expression and felt a small worry rising inside him. He didn't want to pressure her, but he also didn't want her to disappear without explanation. He walked closer and asked, "Do you need to go somewhere?" It was a simple question, maybe too simple, but he hoped she could sense his concern. Ayanna's eyes met his, and she shook her head lightly. Then she touched her chest, pointed toward him, and made a slow, soft motion that looked like reassurance. Daniel felt relieved. She wasn't leaving, not yet. Still, he sensed that something important was on her mind. Ayanna then motioned for him to follow her. She walked slowly into the forest, choosing a familiar path. Daniel walked behind her, curious but trusting. The forest was calm this morning. Sunlight filtered through the trees, creating soft patterns on the ground. Birds sang in the distance, and the cool morning air smelled fresh. They walked for several minutes until Ayanna stopped by a large tree. Its trunk was wide and strong, and the roots curled over the ground like thick ropes. She touched the bark with her hand and closed her eyes for a few seconds, as if greeting something or remembering something important. Daniel waited, wondering what she wanted to show him. Then Ayanna bent down and brushed away some leaves from the ground. Beneath the leaves were small markings carved into a stone. The carvings looked old. Daniel knelt beside her and studied them. They were simple shapes, lines, circles, symbols that Daniel didn't understand. But Ayanna touched them with gentleness. She pointed to one of the symbols and then touched her heart. Then she pointed to another symbol and touched Daniel's arm. He did not fully understand, but he felt she was trying to tell him something meaningful. Ayanna took a deep breath and began drawing the symbols in the dirt, recreating them carefully. She tapped one, then pointed to herself. Then she tapped the second and pointed to him again. Daniel thought for a moment. "Are you saying we are connected?" he asked softly. Ayanna didn't know the exact words, but the tone, the feeling, the expression, she understood. She nodded slowly. Daniel felt something shift inside him, a realization. Quiet, but powerful. He had thought she came to his tent only seeking warmth and shelter, but now he understood the truth was deeper. She had felt something from the beginning, something she couldn't put into words. And maybe he had felt it too, even if he hadn't recognized it right away. Ayanna then sat on the ground near the tree and motioned for him to sit beside her. Daniel lowered himself, and for a moment they sat quietly, listening to the soft sounds of the forest. The air felt peaceful, almost sacred. Then, with calm and clarity, Ayanna placed her hand gently over Daniel's. It was a simple gesture, but it carried more meaning than anything she had said. Daniel looked at her, and she looked back with trust and softness in her eyes. He felt a quiet understanding pass between them. He realized she was telling him she chose to be here, not by accident, not by need, but by her own heart. Daniel took a slow breath and held her hand a little more firmly, but still gently. He didn't need words either. He hoped she could feel that he accepted her presence, her trust, and the quiet connection forming between them. Ayanna then leaned her head lightly against his shoulder, and Daniel felt a warmth growing inside, deeper than anything he had felt since coming to this remote place. The moment was honest, simple, and peaceful. They stayed like that for a long time, not speaking, only sharing the quiet comfort of being together. Later, when they returned to the camp, the day was already brighter. Daniel prepared for his work, gathering tools and supplies. Ayanna walked beside him and helped where she could, handing him small items or holding things steady. Even though she didn't know his tasks fully, she always found a way to be helpful. Throughout the day, Daniel kept noticing little things about her, the patience in her movements, the calmness in her expressions, the thoughtful way she observed everything. He felt a growing appreciation for her presence. At midday, they took a break near a fallen log. Daniel gave her water, and she smiled at him with quiet gratitude. They shared a simple lunch and watched birds hopping across the branches above them. Daniel found himself speaking more openly, telling her about his life, his travels, and the reasons he had come to this remote land. Even though Ayanna understood only parts of his words, she listened with full attention. And somehow, he felt understood anyway. In return, she drew small symbols on the ground to tell him things about her life, her home, her people, her memories. Her drawings were simple but expressive, and Daniel found himself imagining the world she came from. By the time the sun began to set, Daniel realized something important. He no longer felt alone. Ayanna had brought a quiet companionship into his life, something he hadn't even realized he was missing. And it wasn't because she needed shelter or safety, it was because she had chosen to stay. As the sky turned orange and pink, Ayanna and Daniel stood side by side, watching the horizon. The cool wind brushed past them, and leaves rustled softly in the trees. Daniel looked at her with a gentle smile. "I'm glad you came to my tent that night," he said softly. Ayanna turned toward him, understanding the warmth behind his words, even if she didn't catch every detail. She touched her chest, then touched his arm again, repeating the gesture she had made earlier near the old carvings. A connection, a choice. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes," he whispered. "Me too." When they returned to the tent for the night, the air was calm, and the stars above shone bright. Daniel lit a small lamp, and the soft light filled the tent with a warm glow. Ayanna sat beside him, close but gentle. She no longer looked uncertain or shy. Instead, she seemed assured, peaceful, as if she knew she had found the right place to be. Daniel felt the same. The journey ahead was unknown, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, they would face it together, step by step, with trust, respect, and the quiet bond they had built. For the first time in a long time, Daniel did not feel like a man living far from the world. He felt like someone who had found a meaningful connection in the most unexpected way. Ayanna rested her head lightly against his shoulder again, and Daniel smiled softly. The night outside grew quiet, but inside the tent, the calm warmth between them grew stronger, a reminder that sometimes two people meet for reasons they don't understand at first, but the heart always knows. And in that peaceful silence, their story truly began.